The rain came down in hard sheets, slapping against the warped tin roof of the Ashford auction barn. Inside, the place smelled of wet straw, mildew, and old disappointment. A dozen men leaned against wooden rails, cowboy hats low, hands buried in coat pockets. Most had already found what they came for: stocky geldings, a few mares with decent hips, young ones with clean hooves and strong legs. Now, at the tail end of the lineup, came the sad cases, the leftovers. A chestnut horse stepped, or rather stumbled, into the center of the arena. His coat was dull, his ribs visible through the mud-caked fur. His mane hung in greasy ropes over a bowed neck. He looked ancient, tired, like the ghost of some horse that had once mattered. No papers, no name. Just a number pinned to his side. Eli Turner, the auctioneer, smacked his gavel and forced a grin. "All right, boys, next up we got this old-timer. Unregistered, no pedigree. Let's start at $50. No one moved. The silence was thicker than the steam rising off soaked cowboy boots. A voice from the back drawled, "Might be worth more dead than alive." Chuckles rippled through the barn. Walt Granger stood at the edge of the crowd, hat dripping, arms folded tight across his chest. He hadn't come to buy anything. Hell, he didn't even know why he'd come. Maybe to escape the sound of the wind rattling through his broken barn doors. Maybe to remember a time when life didn't feel like one long, slow collapse. But then the horse looked up. It wasn't dramatic. No music swelled. No thunder cracked. Just a glance. A brief locking of eyes between a man and an animal who both looked like they'd been kicked too many times by life. Walt exhaled through his nose. Then, without thinking, he raised his hand. "50, he said. Eli blinked. "Sold. To Mr. Granger." Someone snorted behind him. Walt's taking in strays again. Probably talking to him, too. Walt ignored the jab. He walked slow toward the pen, where the horse stood motionless in the slush. Up close, he looked worse. Scars laced his legs. A white blaze down his forehead was nearly swallowed by grime. But there was something else, too. The way he stood. Not panicked, not broken, just waiting. As Walt led the horse out to his trailer, a voice called after him. "You planning on opening a hospice for useless animals, Granger?" It was Deputy Rick Owens, leaning against his squad car like he owned the world. Rain slicked off his wide-brim hat. He gave Walt a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Maybe I'll pay your place a visit," he said. "Make sure you're not violating any ordinances." Walt didn't stop walking. "Be my guest, Rick. Just call first so I can bake you a pie." He loaded the horse into his rattling trailer and drove through the winding back roads, headlights cutting through curtains of fog. The cab of his old truck was cold, the heater long since given up. As the wipers squeaked back and forth, Walt found himself talking to the animal in the back, like he used to do with Martha before the cancer took her. "I don't know why I did it," he muttered. "Maybe I'm just tired of watching everything get thrown away." The rain softened to a mist by the time he pulled through the sagging gate of his farm. The wood was rotting. The hinges screamed in protest. The barn loomed ahead, half its roof patched with a blue tarp flapping in the wind. The house beside it had one working light in the kitchen and no porch railings. Walt backed the trailer in and stepped out, boots squishing in the mud. He opened the latch. The horse didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he descended the ramp, one cautious hoof at a time. He lifted his head and took in the surroundings like someone recognizing a childhood home that had since fallen into ruin. Walt led him into a stall, throwing down some hay and filling the water bucket. "Don't get too comfortable," he said. "I barely got enough to feed myself." The horse sipped water slowly, not desperate like the others Walt had rescued. There was patience in him, dignity, and something else Walt couldn't place. He knelt beside the animal to check his legs. That's when he saw it. A faded, near-invisible brand on the left flank, hidden beneath layers of grime. Walt rubbed the mud away gently with his calloused thumb, a circle with a slash through it. He froze. It couldn't be. He'd seen that mark before, years ago. In magazines, in racetracks, on television. A high-dollar brand belonging to Silver Pine thoroughbreds, a breeding ground for champions, and scandal. Walt's stomach turned. He stood and stared at the horse, really stared. "You're not just some broken-down nag, are you?" he whispered. "Who the hell are you?" The horse didn't blink, didn't twitch, just stared back, still and unreadable. Walt stepped back slowly, his heart thudding harder now. The wind howled outside, rattling the barn's loose panels. He leaned against the stall door, staring at the brand like it might vanish if he looked away. Something wasn't right. Something about this horse didn't add up. How did a branded Silver Pine horse, likely worth millions, end up in a backwoods auction, nameless, starved, and forgotten? Walt didn't have the answers. But in that moment he knew one thing for sure. This horse had a story, and someone had tried real hard to make the world forget it. The morning broke cold and silver over Ashford, Oregon, mist curling over the fences like ghosts refusing to leave. Walt Granger stood in his barn, holding a mug of black coffee that had long since gone cold. The horse, no, Valor, he was beginning to suspect, stood silently in the stall, ears twitching, eyes fixed on nothing and everything at once. Walt had barely slept. All night he'd turned over the pieces in his mind. The brand, the eyes, the way the horse moved. Something about it all had stirred memories buried so deep he hadn't realized they were still breathing. He dug through boxes in the attic, catalogs, race programs, clippings from another life. He wasn't always just a lonely farmer scraping by. He'd once dreamed of breeding horses himself, of having a stallion with fire in its chest. That dream died with Martha, but he kept the paper trail, and in one yellowed catalog from 5 years ago he found it. Page 47. A photo, full color. A younger chestnut stallion, coat gleaming like polished copper, eyes sharp and electric. Valor, it read beneath the image. Sired by Copper Saints, Dam Glory Parade, Silver Pine thoroughbreds. Walt stared at the picture and then back at the horse in the stall. Older, worn, but unmistakable. Holy hell, he breathed. He knew he needed someone to confirm it, someone who would really know. So he picked up the landline and dialed a number he hadn't used in over a decade. "Mason," he said when the voice answered. "It's Walt. I got a horse here I need you to see." There was a pause on the other end. Then a gravelly voice replied, "This ain't about another rescue case, is it? Just come." By late afternoon, a battered Silverado pulled into the drive. Mason Lake stepped out, thick-set, gray beard, whiskey breath, and sharp eyes that had once judged Derby runners. He followed Walt into the barn without a word, and when he saw the horse, his boots stopped cold. "I'll be damned," Mason muttered. He took 3 slow steps toward the stall. "That's him. You're sure?" "Walt, I'd know Valor anywhere. Hell, I bet on him the day he vanished." Mason's face darkened. They said he pulled a tendon, but the story never sat right. Walt explained how he found him, what shape he was in, and the brand. Mason listened, his brows knitting tighter with every word. "This ain't just a lost horse," Mason finally said. "This is a cover-up." Before Walt could ask more, headlights swept across the side window of the barn. A beat-up Subaru pulled in fast. The driver door flew open, and Rachel, Walt's daughter, stepped out in jeans and a fleece vest, her hair pulled tight, a stethoscope around her neck. "What the hell, Dad?" she snapped as she stormed into the barn. "I get a call from your neighbor saying you're dragging home another half-dead animal, and now I see 2 half-dead men standing around him." Walt straightened. "Good to see you too, Rach. I don't have time for this. You're barely feeding yourself, the bank keeps calling me, and now you're hoarding dying horses again? He's not just any horse. Oh, right, because this one blinked at you funny." Mason raised a hand. "Ma'am, this one is different." Rachel turned her gaze to Mason, pausing at the tone of his voice. She'd heard his name before, once a top trainer before alcohol and scandal took him down. "I know this horse," Mason said softly. "Or I did, before someone tried to erase him." Rachel sighed, shaking her head. "God, you two are both delusional." She turned to leave, but stopped short when Sadie, a stray black and white shepherd mix, trotted in from the woods and took her place by the stall, pressing herself close to the horse's side like a guard. "She's been doing that since he got here," Walt said. "Hasn't left his side." Before Rachel could speak again, a black pickup rumbled down the road, slowed, and then paused outside the gate. Its headlights stayed on for a few seconds. Then it turned and rolled off without entering. "Friend of yours?" Mason asked. "No," Walt said, "and I don't like the feeling I got." That night, Walt and Mason dug deeper. While Rachel sat in silence at the kitchen table, flipping through her phone, the 2 older men sat cross-legged in the barn, going through an old racing saddle Walt had bought years ago in a lot sale. It was Mason who found it. A loose seam in the underside, a hidden pocket. Inside, a blood-stained cloth and a foil-wrapped SD card. Walt felt a chill crawl up his spine. Rachel, watching from the stall door, saw the color drain from her father's face. "What is that?" "Trouble," Mason said. Rachel took the cloth in gloved hands. "This isn't just blood, this is fresh. Well, maybe a few months old, but newer than anything else here. What the hell were you storing this in?" "I didn't store anything," Walt said. "It came with the saddle." Rachel's voice lowered. "You think it was hidden there?" Mason looked down at the SD card, then up at the horse. Someone wanted to make sure if Valor was ever found, the truth might be too. Rachel crossed her arms. "You're telling me this horse didn't just vanish? That he was disappeared?" Walt looked at his daughter, really looked at her, the tired in her eyes, the skepticism, but under it the same fire her mother had carried. "I don't know what this is yet," he said, "but if someone tried to erase this horse, they damn well had a reason." Sadie let out a low growl. Walt turned. The barn door was open just an inch wider than it had been. He stepped forward and slammed it shut, locked it, then turned back to the others. "Whatever we just dug up," he said, "we're not alone anymore." The photo of Valor had barely been up on Rachel's private vet tech forum for an hour when the message arrived. From unknown journalist 23 at protonmail.com. Subject: "I know that horse. We need to talk. It's not safe." E. Reyes. Rachel stared at it, lips pressed into a line. She hadn't tagged the photo, hadn't mentioned the name Valor. Just a vague caption. "Unregistered Chestnut Stallion, Oregon." Brand looks familiar. Any help? And somehow, someone knew. She printed the email and brought it into the kitchen where Walt and Mason were eating eggs and silence. She dropped it on the table. "This just came in." Mason picked it up, scanned it, and let out a slow whistle. "Emily Reyes. That name ring a bell?" Walt squinted. Reyes, like Jake Reyes, the stable hand who died in a hayloft at Silverpine the same night Valor vanished, Mason finished. Rachel folded her arms. They said it was an accident. They also said Valor tore a tendon and was euthanized quietly, Mason said. That horse is standing in your damn barn right now. The air thickened. Walt wiped his mouth and stood. Call her. Set up a meeting. Emily Reyes arrived the next morning in a beat-up Toyota Corolla with Washington plates. She was younger than Walt expected, maybe late 20s, wearing jeans, hiking boots, and a field jacket soaked from the drive. Her dark hair was pulled back, her eyes alert but tired. Inside the farmhouse, she sat at the table, wrapping her hands around a mug of black coffee. "My brother didn't fall," she said without preamble. "He was going to whistleblow on Silverpine. Said they were doping horses, high-dollar ones, hiding injuries, selling results. He'd been documenting everything." She glanced around at them. "He told me Valor saw things, heard things, that he kept him nearby at night because he trusted him more than people." Rachel blinked. "You're saying the horse was a witness?" Emily nodded. "Not like a person, obviously, but horses remember things. Trauma, sounds, faces. Jake swore Valor had a sixth sense about danger. The night Jake died, he told me he'd hidden everything. His files, a flash drive, something? He wouldn't say where. Next morning, I got a call saying he'd fallen from the hayloft." She pulled a small folder from her jacket and handed it to Walt. "Police ruled it an accident in less than a day. Coroner's report was sealed. My requests for records were denied until I pulled this." Inside was a doctored report. 2 versions of Jake's autopsy, one clean, one edited. The latter had been scrubbed of any mention of contusions to the neck and bruising to his jaw. Rachel's voice was hoarse. "Someone strangled him." Emily looked to Walt. "The man who owns Silverpine, Randall Holton, has friends in every department. State cops, judges. I tried to publish a story about it, got threatened. My editor got scared, pulled the piece." Walt didn't say a word. He got up and walked to the barn. He needed to look into Valor's eyes again. The stallion stood perfectly still, but when Walt approached, his ears turned, his body tensed, then his head dipped ever so slightly, acknowledging him, trusting. Walt reached out and touched his nose. "We've got company, old boy." That afternoon, they heard the sound of tires crunching gravel. 2 black SUVs rolled up the driveway. Walt stepped out onto the porch. Mason followed, cradling a shotgun in the crook of his arm. Rachel and Emily stayed just behind the door. The driver's door opened first. A tall, broad man in a sleek wool coat stepped out. His jaw was square, his salt and pepper hair neatly styled. A smile sat on his lips, but his eyes were hard. "Mr. Granger," he called. "Mind if we have a word? Depends on who's asking." He approached, reaching into his coat, not for a weapon, but for a badge. "Randall Holton. I used to run Silverpine Thoroughbreds." Walt didn't offer his hand. "Didn't think you'd drive all the way to Ashford for small talk." The second man exited the SUV. Shorter, tense, dressed in tactical black. A faint scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. His eyes swept the property like a drone. "This is Colt Mercer," Holton said, "my security advisor." Mercer said nothing, just watched. Holton turned his eyes back to Walt. "I believe you recently purchased a horse at auction." "Maybe I did. What's it to you?" Holton's smile tightened. "We had a valuable animal go missing years ago, a racehorse, chestnut stallion, a unique brand. I believe he might be here." "I pick up a lot of horses," Walt said flatly. Then let's keep it simple, Holton said. If the horse I'm referring to is here, I'd like to buy him back. Name your price. Not for sale. You haven't even heard the offer. Walt stepped forward, eyes narrowing. I'm not interested in money, and I don't trust men who show up with armed guards and polished shoes on muddy farms. Behind him, Mason shifted, hand resting near the trigger guard of the shotgun. Rachel stepped out beside her father. Time to go, she said. Holton held Walt's gaze for a long beat. Then, with a calmness that sent a chill through the air, he said, Some things, Mr. Granger, are better left buried. He turned and walked back toward the SUV. Mercer lingered a moment longer, eyes flicking from Walt to the barn. Then he turned without a word. They drove off without spinning a single tire. That night, Walt couldn't sleep. He sat by the barn window with a thermos of black coffee and the shotgun across his lap. Sadie lay beside him, ears twitching. Valor was awake too, head raised, muscles tight, like he could feel the danger circling. Walt whispered into the silence, They want you gone, boy. But I don't care if I lose this farm, my name, or what little I've got left. I'm not letting them finish what they started. A soft creak echoed from outside. Walt stood, shotgun at the ready. The door to the barn had been left ajar, not wide, but just enough. Sadie growled. He stepped toward it, slow and deliberate, and shut it with a firm click. Somewhere in the dark outside, an engine purred to life. Then silence. Back inside, Valor didn't flinch. He just stared at Walt like he knew, like he'd been through this before, and like he knew what was coming next. The farmhouse was quiet, but the air inside crackled like a live wire. Walt sat at the kitchen table, the SD card they'd found tucked into a USB drive, now loaded onto Rachel's laptop. Mason hovered behind him, a bandage on his forearm from where Sadie had barked too loud and he'd jolted into a rusty nail. Rachel leaned over the chair, arms braced, face tense. Emily sat across from Walt, fingers laced tightly as if bracing for a storm. The screen flickered, then opened a grainy black and white security video. It showed the inside of a stable tack room. Dim light, leather halters hanging on pegs. A man entered, young, lean, hoodie half-zipped. Jake Reyes. He was pacing, nervous. He looked straight into the camera as if unsure if it still worked. Then another figure stepped in behind him. Randall Holton. There was no audio, but you didn't need it. Jake pointed, jabbed his finger at Holton's chest. Holton grabbed him by the collar. They shouted, faces red, spit flying. Holton's body language increasingly unhinged. Jake stepped back, clearly saying something final. Holton lunged, the feed cut to static. Silence fell like a dropped hammer. Jesus, Rachel whispered. Emily's voice shook. He killed my brother. That footage is proof. Mason backed up slowly, shaking his head. They're not going to let that see daylight. Holton's men won't just threaten anymore. We're already past that, Walt said. They've been circling the barn for days, watching the road. We can't wait for the sheriff or the press. We have to move. Move where? Rachel asked. You think they're going to just let us ride out with a witness on 4 legs? Emily looked up. There's a safe house. My friend runs a rescue ranch in the Cascades. Signal's spotty, off-grid. She used to train ferals. She owes me. Mason pulled a duffel bag from behind the couch. I know how to disappear for a while. I'll ride escort. You're bleeding, Rachel pointed out. I've done worse hungover. They packed in under 20 minutes. Walt refused to saddle Valor. He doesn't need it. He runs better bare. Rachel hesitated, then grabbed a halter and climbed into the old feed truck with Emily. Mason mounted a mare named Cass, a retired trail horse with a stubborn heart. Walt stood with one hand on Valor's neck. "You ready, old boy?" Valor snorted, pawed the ground once, and turned toward the tree line. The storm broke over the ridge just as they hit the high pass. Rain pelted the mountain road, turning gravel to slick clay. Headlights danced behind them, just flashes at first, glimpses through trees. Emily's voice crackled over the walkie Mason had handed her. "They're behind us, at least 2 SUVs. "Keep going," Walt said. "No stopping." They came around a bend and hit a clearing. The railway trestle, an old timber bridge half collapsed over a churning gorge. Below, the river snarled like a thing alive. "There's no way that thing holds," Rachel said. "We don't have a choice." Walt kicked Valor's sides. The stallion launched forward. Mason followed, Cass grunting beneath him. Emily gunned the truck toward the base of the hill. Rain blurred Walt's vision. The bridge groaned under Valor's weight, planks shifting beneath iron shoes. Halfway across, one beam snapped with a shotgun crack, dropping part of the rail into the abyss. Rachel screamed. Walt shouted, "Don't look down!" Behind them, the SUVs skidded to a halt. The men stepped out. Mercer leading, gun in hand, eyes locked on them. He raised the weapon, took aim. A single shot rang out. Mason fired from the saddle, hitting the dirt near Mercer's boots. "Get the hell back!" he yelled. Walt and Valor made it across. The horse didn't slow, didn't flinch, just thundered through the dark like he knew the stakes. As Mason cleared the edge, the last beam collapsed behind him. The trestle vanished into the gorge with a roar. They were across. For now. Hours later, safe in a lean-to tucked into the pine, Emily's contact, Marla Jameson, a blunt horse trainer with a Glock under her pillow, tended to their wounds and wired up a satellite connection. Walt sat beside Valor, brushing mud from his coat, breathing with him. "He saved our damn lives," Rachel said softly. "He knew," Walt whispered. "He knew that bridge would hold, knew how fast to run. I don't know how, but he did." Emily walked in with her laptop. "I uploaded the footage, sent it to every news outlet I know. Social media, encrypted servers, forums, it's out there now." "You think that's enough?" Mason asked, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. Emily nodded. "They can't kill what the world already knows." Walt rested his forehead against Valor's neck. The horse stood still, quiet, a storm behind his eyes. "They tried to erase you," Walt whispered. "But you were never gone. You were just waiting." Outside, the rain slowed to a hush, and for the first time in a long time, Walt felt like the fight was only beginning. The rain was gone by morning, but the ground still shimmered with puddles reflecting the rising sun. A fresh wind swept down from the ridge, carrying the clean scent of pine and wet earth. Walt Granger stepped out of the barn lean-to, his legs stiff from the night's escape, and looked across the field where Valor stood beneath a red maple, bathed in golden light. The old stallion looked stronger. Like each mile they'd ridden had peeled away years of wear. His eyes were alert, his chest full. He no longer looked like a horse dragged from a forgotten auction. He looked like what he'd always been. A survivor. A symbol. Inside the cabin, Emily sat hunched over her laptop, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. The SD card footage had exploded overnight. Every major outlet had picked it up. The hashtags #sign Justice for Jake and #sign Valor Lives were trending. People were talking, sharing, demanding answers. "News vans are already on their way to Ashford," she said. "FBI issued a statement just now. They've opened a federal investigation into Holton and Silverpine." Turns out this wasn't the only case buried under fake autopsies and shredded contracts. Rachel leaned against the counter sipping lukewarm coffee. "They gonna come after us?" Emily glanced up. "Not anymore. Holton was arrested this morning. Mercer's still missing, but they've got marshals posted at all his known properties. If he runs, he won't get far." Walt said nothing. He just kept looking out the window, watching the wind dance through Valor's mane. 2 weeks later, Ashford was buzzing in a way Walt hadn't seen in years. Camera crews parked in front of the old Granger farmhouse. Reporters scrambled for interviews. Walt gave none. He let Emily speak for Jake, for the truth, for all the stories that had been silenced. Mason gave a single quote before disappearing into the hills. "Sometimes," he told a local station, "a horse don't just carry weight. He carries memory." Rachel moved back into the house. She didn't say it out loud, but Walt knew it was for more than just to help him keep the place afloat. The anger between them had faded, replaced by something rawer, a need to rebuild, not just the farm, but each other. They worked side by side fixing fences, mending the barn roof, laying fresh gravel down the old driveway. And through it all, Valor watched. Not just like a horse, but like a guardian, as if he understood exactly what was happening. One morning, Walt pulled out a rusted sign from behind the tool shed. The paint was chipped, the letters barely legible. He scraped it clean, sanded it, and painted over it by hand. In bold white lettering, "The Valor Project, Rescue, Ride, Rebuild." Beneath it, a smaller phrase, "Some things can't be erased." The program started quietly. A few rescued horses, a few troubled teens, a single therapist who volunteered after seeing the story on the news. Rachel handled the veterinary care. Walt ran the barn. Emily coordinated from afar, now writing full-time, and speaking on investigative panels about whistleblower protection and equine therapy. And Valor. Valor became the soul of it. There was something about him, some silent gravity that pulled the broken pieces of people together. Kids who hadn't spoken in months would walk up and press their foreheads to his. Veterans with haunted eyes found peace brushing his coat. Parents cried, watching their children ride again for the first time. He never shied, never bucked, never faltered. Walt sometimes wondered if Martha had been right all along, that animals carried something human in them. Not words, but memory, energy, spirit. One afternoon, a boy named Henry arrived, 10 years old, quiet, polio in one leg and a stutter so bad he hadn't spoken in public since kindergarten. He was terrified of horses at first. Rachel worked with him slowly, day by day, step by step, until the day he reached up and touched Valor's shoulder, and the stallion lowered his head. Rachel helped him climb onto the saddle. Walt stood at the paddock gate, arms folded. The boy straightened, took the reins, and for the first time in his life, rode a horse on his own. Walt blinked hard against the sun. Rachel turned to him. "He's ready." Walt nodded, then stepped into the paddock and approached the horse. He placed one hand against Valor's flank, feeling the warmth, the heartbeat, the history. "You gave this to him," Walt said, "to all of them." Valor turned his head and met Walt's eyes. Not a glance, a look, full, alive. "Hell of a run, old man," Walt whispered. And for once, the wind didn't feel like it was pulling things apart. It felt like it was carrying something forward. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Walt sat on the porch with Rachel beside him, coffee in hand. In the distance, the kids brushed down the horses. Laughter floated across the field. Sadie lay curled at Walt's feet, finally resting. "You ever think," Rachel said, "if you hadn't gone to that auction?" "I wasn't supposed to be there," Walt said. "I just Drove? Rachel smiled faintly. Maybe something else drove you. They sat in silence for a while. Then Rachel turned to him. You know what the best part is? What's that? He didn't need a race to become a legend, just a second chance. Walt looked back out across the pasture where Valor stood tall, golden in the light, and smiled.